Hello and welcome to Sacred Mindshift Circle. I'm your host, Dahlia Deborah Donalds. And today we have the honor to welcome Robert Waggoner. Robert is an internationally recognized author, lucid dream researcher, and speaker known for his groundbreaking work exploring the deeper dimensions of conscious awareness within dreams. A past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, he has spent decades investigating how lucid dreaming can be used for insight, emotional healing, creativity, and spiritual understanding. His books include Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. These books have helped thousands of readers learn how to consciously engage with the dreaming mind and access profound inner wisdom. Through his research and teachings, Robert invites us to reconsider the nature of consciousness of itself and the transformative possibilities available when we awaken within the dream state. Welcome, Robert. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
So, I've seen a couple of your other podcasts and some of the work that you do, and this topic really fascinates me because I think that at least for myself, from the time I was young, especially, I've been a very, I would call it a prophetic dreamer, but but I'm very fascinated with dreams and the whole concept of dreams. But I want to know, how did you begin to discover or to delve into this topic about lucid dreaming and dreaming in general?
Right. So, as a young child, I just had a very active dream life. Like you, on occasion, I'd have what I considered prophetic or precognitive dreams. Like in a dream, I'd hear someone say something really unusual. And then 5 hours later, I'd be on the playground with my fourth grade friends, and someone would say that same exact, very unusual phrase. And I thought, boy, I dreamt that this morning. How can that be? So I had a very active dream life. But this is how I got into lucid dreaming. So I was in high school and I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan. And in the book, his shamanic teacher tells him to find his hands in the dream state and become aware of dreaming. And I thought, could you do that? Is that something that's possible? And so what I did, I looked around for a technique. There wasn't a technique. And so I just developed a technique. And within 3 nights, I had my very first consciously induced lucid dream.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. A lot of people try to induce it, and for some people, it does seem to happen naturally a lot of the times, and they don't really know what they did to provoke it. How did you establish a kind of, I guess, formula to cause lucid dreaming to occur?
Right. So this is what I did. I had the basic concept that somehow you were to find your hands in the dream state and become consciously aware of dreaming, which is what lucid dreaming is. So this is what I did. I knew about the power of suggestion. And so every night before I'd go to sleep, for about 5 minutes, I'd look at my hands, the palm of my hands, while saying in my mind, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. I'd say that for about 5 minutes and fall asleep. On the third night of doing this practice, I'm walking through my high school hallway. And again, I was in high school at the time. And suddenly my hands popped right in front of my face. And I go, oh my God, my hands, this is a dream. And all of a sudden, I realized those football player guys, they're actually dream figures. And I thought, what does this dream wall feel like? And I reached over and touched the nearby wall, and it felt cool and nubby, just like a concrete wall would. So then I started to explore, and I walked out of the hallway to the administration building. And here's where something unusual happened. I was looking at the brickwork on the administrative building because it was just so detailed. And I knew I'm in a dream, but I was still stunned by the detail. As I was looking at it, suddenly the lucid dream got shaky. And I remember that Don Juan told Carlos Castaneda not to stare at anything while you're in this state. You shouldn't stare at things. But he said, if you do, then you should look back at your hands and renew the power of dreaming. So I looked at my hands, and now here's something really interesting that happened. I became a little dot of light, a circle of light inside my palm prints, which were now as high as canyons. So if you can imagine kind of being this piece of light floating through the canyons of your palm prints, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so wild. And after a while, I popped back to my original size. I decided I wanted to go flying, started to fly, and I got so excited I woke up. So that was my very first lucid dream, and that's what really hooked me on exploring this state of awareness.
So after realizing that you could do these things in the dream, just to clarify, because a lot of people also, I think, talk about astral projection. What would be the main difference between astral projection and lucid dreaming? What are the differences?
Right. So a lucid dream, you realize within the dream that you're dreaming. You might have an out of body or an astral projection when you have a heart attack, and suddenly you're floating on the ceiling, looking down at the doctors and nurses trying to revive your body. So there you didn't realize within a dream you're dreaming. You were having a heart attack. You were having an emergency. Other times is you might be falling asleep and suddenly you start to hear all this humming and buzzing around your head or your body. And then all of a sudden you realize you're seeing the bedroom from 6 feet above your bed. And how did I get up here? That again, you did not realize within a dream you're dreaming. So a lucid dream has to have that in. You have to be within a dream and then realize within a dream you're dreaming. Now, they're similar in some regards because they're both different states of awareness, and they both rely on the nature of the mind. But in general, to be in a lucid dream, you have to realize within the dream you're dreaming.
So overall, let me know, could anybody actually become lucid in the dream, or are some people more prone to it than others?
Right. So first, I would say it helps if you have good dream recall. Because if you have good dream recall, then you're more likely to remember those moments when you saw something totally bizarre or strange and thought, wait a second, this has to be a dream. I'm dreaming this. And then you could explore. So you have to kind of develop your dream recall. But I do think that most everybody could learn how to lucid dream. When they do surveys of the general population, about 50% or so of the general population says, yeah, they can recall one lucid dream they've had. But there was an interesting study done by a woman in Germany, Ursula Voss, and she wanted to know when lucid dreaming would begin in the natural population. So she went to a school that had kids ages 6 to 19, and she asked them, have you ever become lucidly aware and knew that you were dreaming while in the dream? And then she would interview each child who said yes, just to be sure that it was truly a lucid dream. But the thing that surprised me, of these kids who were 6 to 19, basically 51% had could recall a lucid dream. But the thing that surprised me, like 25% of the 8-year-olds had already had a lucid dream. And so no one had taught him. It just happened naturally, spontaneously, and all. And I remember when I had a spontaneous lucid dream when I was about 10 years old. I was in the public library. All of a sudden, I saw a baby Tyrannosaurus Rex walking through the public library. And I thought, wait a second, aren't dinosaurs extinct? What's going on? And then I realized, oh, this has to be a dream. And I thought, oh, well, if this is a dream, then I can tell myself to wake up. And I told myself to wake up, and I woke up. And so, I had a spontaneous lucid dream when I was about 10 years old, but I really didn't begin to consciously induce it until I was in high school, about age 17.
Now, a lot of the work that you do also is using this or using lucid dreaming to help people when they suffer from anxiety and nightmares. How does that work? How can you use lucid dreaming to, like for example, overcome anxiety?
Well, so probably the easiest way is first to talk about how we could use it with nightmares. So there was a psychotherapist back in 1982 who decided that he had two clients who both had post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and they had recurring nightmares. So every night they'd have a nightmare. They could hardly get any good sleep because they hated to sleep because they'd have nightmares. So he had learned about lucid dreaming because the scientific evidence came out in 1980. And so what he did, he brought his two PTSD sufferers into his office and he said, look, when you become aware that this is a dream, that this is that recurring nightmare, I want you to realize that you're dreaming, and then I just want you to change one thing in the nightmare. Just change one thing. And what happened? Both of them did that. They became consciously aware within that recurring nightmare. They changed one thing. And then here's the surprising thing. After that, their nightmares basically ceased. So the fact that they did something new in the nightmare changed everything. So instead of running or screaming or yelling or fighting, they did something new and creative. And that made their nightmare come to an end. So that's when people started to realize, oh, lucid dreaming might help with recurring nightmares. You could learn how to stop recurring nightmares by becoming lucidly aware. But when it comes to anxiety, I started to hear from various people that they had used lucid dreams to end their anxiety. And one of them was a young woman I met at a university where I was giving a talk. And what she said is that during her high school years, she had developed anxiety. She'd have occasional panic attacks and all that. But at the same time, she got really interested in lucid dreaming. And she began to see, she had this one pivotal lucid dream that explained it all to her. So she was in this lucid dream, going along, having fun, talking to the dream figures. And then she thought, I wonder if something bad is going to happen. And suddenly in the lucid dream, off in the corner, these giant thunder clouds appeared, really dark and menacing. And then she thought, boy, I wonder if those thunder clouds are going to get worse. And now there starts to be lightning and hail and wind. And now she's freaking out. And now she wonders, I wonder what else bad could happen. And now I don't know what it was, zombies appeared or whatever. And when she woke up from that lucid dream, she realized everything was going great until I let my mind go down that pathway of fear and concern and anxiety. And as soon as I did, what happened? The lucid dream reflected back to me fear, concern, and anxiety. And so what she realized is that the next time in her waking hours, when she would have that kind of moment when she could go down that path of fear and concern and anxiety, she became lucidly aware in the waking state and said, wait a second, I'm not going to let my mind do that. I'm going to think, oh, things will work out. Things always work out. This isn't a big deal. I'll get through this. And she'd get through it. And so she realized that by by mindfully observing her mind, she could begin to control her anxiety and her panic attacks, and she brought them down to a really low level.
And also, besides that, I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. And I think that it's so hard sometimes in the dreams to control what's happening. But I do believe that that is true. If you kind of stop yourself, you'll stop that process of going downhill and getting worse and worse and worse imagery. But it could be also, like you said, of whatever is going on in your mind in the daytime. If these are things that you normally feel, it's normal that those kind of things are going to be reflected. So, considering this, can you also use lucid dreaming to be, to help you intuitively or to problem solve? Are there any other things that you can use lucid dreaming to do?
Right. Lucid dreaming has a lot of benefits, and that's why I decided to write books on it because no one was writing about all the benefits. And I've been lucid dreaming for a number of decades and had more than 1,000 lucid dreams, so I could see the benefits. So one of the first things I would say, lucid dreaming is really great when it comes to accessing deeper levels of creativity. And so, like some artists, when they become lucidly aware, they'll either announce, when I turn that corner or when I open that door, show me the greatest piece of art I could create at this time. And they open up the door, and hanging on the wall is an incredible piece of art. And they sit there and examine it, and they wake up and do some sketches. And I've talked to some of those artists, and they say that when they do it in waking reality, when they recreate that painting in waking reality, it takes about half the time as a normal painting of that size would, because it's like they say it's like their body and their mind already know it, already have accessed it. They have a insight into it. But also you'll see it people who are into music. Sometimes in lucid dreams, they'll discover the most incredible music they could create, and they'll wake up either with lyrics or they'll wake up with just the musical sound that they can create. It's interesting too that when you listen to the Beatles, Paul McCartney said that the music to Yesterday came to him in a dream. And he jumped out of bed and he ran over to the piano and started to play it. And then he would play that same music for his friends and ask him, whose music is this? And they said, you're playing it. It's your music. But he said it came to him in a dream. And then one day the lyrics started to come to him, and it's, one of the most incredible pieces of music out there. So a lot of people have used it for art and music, and then other people have used lucid dreaming to solve real world problems. There is a book by researcher Stephen LaBerge called Exploring the World of Lucid Dreams. And he writes of this one gentleman who was a software programmer. And he said, the software programmer said, whenever he got stuck writing software programming, he would try to have a lucid dream. And in the lucid dream, he would call out for Albert Einstein to appear. And then he and Albert Einstein would sit at a table and figure out the software programming problem. And then when they figured it out, he'd tell Einstein to go away so he could memorize it. He said he'd take it into his work in the morning, and 99% of the time, it was just dead on. It worked perfectly. So again, when you're consciously aware within the dream state, you have an amazing ability to access deeper creativity.
Are there any challenges that some people might have trying to get into that state? I mean, and like in my experience, like I said, I've never really tried. The times that I have been lucid, and I can count on my hands how many times I've had many more prophetic dreams than lucid dreams, maybe once, twice max, that I can really say like, oh wait, I'm in the dream. Are there any challenges to trying to get into that state?
Right. It can take a little bit of perseverance and work at it in order for a person to get lucid. Now, some people just naturally get into it, but other people, it might take them 3 or 4 weeks or whatever to have their first lucid dream. I would say some of it is the technique you use, because there's some techniques out there that literally take a month for enough energy to get built up into your mind for you to have a lucid dream. Other techniques, I think, are actually easier and can get you into a lucid dreaming state more quickly.
So let's talk a little bit about dream characters. So do they appear to be conscious or autonomous? Because I've had a lot of I've heard a lot of different things about dream characters, and I've seen that they seemingly appear to be as if they're like completely other entities. Like they seem to know things, and I think there was a study that was done. I don't remember right now the name of the doctor. I think it was Foley. I'm not sure. There was a study done in the 80s, and they did notice that a lot of the dream characters could make up words. They would try to avoid some of the dreamers if they saw them in another dream. Like there were a lot of like different studies done about this. What is your opinion about dream characters?
Right. In my books, I have entire chapters on dream characters because they are so interesting. And one key finding is this: dream figures vary. In a lucid dream, you can go up to any dream figure and ask them a question. And a lot of the time, they'll act like they're empty, like they're totally hollow. They won't respond. They'll look at the ground, and you think, okay, I've just met a dream figure who has nothing going on. But then other times you'll meet dream figures who are really sharp. Like, for example, one time I was going down a street and then I realized it was too strange and that this had to be a lucid dream. So then I decided to go into the first doorway down the street, and it was a library. I walk into the library. I know it's a dream. I begin to ask dream figures, would you like to go flying with me? And the first group says, no, no, no. Go to another group, no, no, no. Then I get to the back of the library, and there's this one dream character. She was reading a book and very intently into it. But I go up to her and said, would you like to go flying with me? And she gets this little twinkle in her eye, and she puts down her book and she says, sure, I'll go flying with you. Here's the crazy thing. Suddenly, she reaches out, she grabs my wrist, and she goes flying. I wasn't flying, she was flying me. And we get to the top of the library, and then she goes, look. And she points down through the library. So now it's like we can see to it at the very bottom. And at the very bottom, half covered in dust, is what people would call a Buddhist yantra. So a yantra is a symbolic expression of a mantra. And she goes, look. And that really blew me away. That first, that she would be able to pull me and make me fly. And then second, she would point out something that I never would have noticed in a million years. So these are the kind of dream figures I would call independent agents. They seem to have their own intent, their own purposes, their own knowledge base, and oftentimes, they're they're going their own way apart from your way. So they don't seem a projection of your mind. They seem something else. So those are just kind of, examples of how complex it can be.
Well, what is your opinion about when we enter the dream state? I mean, obviously, like we said before, there's some things that might happen in the dream that are reflections of things that happen in our life. But do you think that maybe we're entering some kind of, another level of reality, some kind of other dimension? What do you think?
Well, it's really complex, and I'll say that it's really very, very complex. Um, I don't know if there's actually different levels of dream reality. And some people, old shamanic traditions, would talk about an upper level, a lower level, and a middle level, and kind of divide things up like that. There actually might be levels to dream reality. And is it a psychological reality or is it part psychological, part physical? Those are all wonderful questions, and I really don't know what to tell you there. But sometimes you do have interesting dreams that make you wonder.
And what about besides dream characters, when people claim that they might see like loved ones or, do you think that it's the same kind of thing, that these are just other agents, maybe in the same figure, or do you think that sometimes they're breaking through from the other side?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what happened to me. So my dad passed away about 25 years ago, and and it was interesting. That week that he passed away, I'd have dreams that he and I were at the TWA counter, and he was going to go on a trip. And he would just kind of sit there, like a potted plant, and that's what there was. And finally, it occurred to me that TWA means Trans World Airlines, and so in a way, he was going, he was changing worlds, he's moving to the land of the dead. But I think that kind of just reflected my symbolic um, thinking at the time, or my, kind of working through my grief. Yeah, he's moving on, is basically what was going on. So then I waited about 6 months and I thought, you know what? I'm going to try to contact my dad in the dream state. And so about 6 months later, I became lucidly aware and I thought, okay, here's my chance. Now I'm going to contact my dad. And all of a sudden, all the dream figures around me told me that it wasn't a good time, that this was a bad time, that this was not a good time, that it was too early. And they told me not to contact my dad. And because they were all in unanimous opinion, I thought, okay, they might have a point here. And so then here's what I made them do. I made these dream figures explain every dream symbol around the space around us. So I'd point at each thing and say, what does that represent? And the dream figures would symbolically tell me, they'd tell me what that symbol represented. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, in the morning I woke up and I thought, maybe I should wait. When Dad wants to come visit me, he can come visit me. I'll just do it like that. So it was about 2 or 3 years later. One night I see this gold ladder, and coming down the gold ladder is my dad. And so immediately I become lucid because I think, wait a second, Dad passed away. I know he's dead. But then I started to laugh because he had such a bad haircut. And I thought, oh my God, he can't even get a good haircut in the after death state. But then I began to think, well, wait a second, is this my dad as a symbol, as a projection of my mind, or is this my dad as a spiritual being in the after death state? So he comes down, we greet each other, and so I decided to ask him questions and figure this out. So the first thing I said to him, I said, Dad, you're from the land of the dead. When do you think Mom's going to pass away? And he said, oh, probably in 2 to 6 years. I said, of what? He said a heart condition. And that really surprised me because my mom had never had any heart problems and she was 10 years younger than my dad. And then I ask him one more question and he responds. And then he tells me to please be quiet because he came to tell me things about the family. And he spent about 10 minutes telling me things about the family. So when I woke up, I thought, well, gosh, now I'm going to have to wait 2 years and see if this is for real. It was 23 months later, almost 2 years exactly later, my mom went to the hospital and almost died of a heart condition. And she recovered from that. And then about 3 years after that, she went back to the hospital. She had been taking a medication that was actually harming her heart, and she almost died. But she made it through that 2 to 6 year period. So, so in those kind of moments, you think, well, wait a second. How did my deceased father pass on that information that nobody could know? I mean, how could he pass on future information that nobody could know? And so, because of that, that's why I always encourage lucid dreamers when you become lucidly aware, ask questions. Try to get some information that's outside of your mind. Otherwise, you'll wake up and you won't know. Was that really mom? Was that really grandma? I don't know. Because all you have is just kind of a feeling sense. It's much better to ask them a question like, who in the family is going to have the next baby? And oh, that's your niece so and so. She's going to have a little baby boy. And it's like, okay, now you have something to pin this on, kind of to rationally investigate it.
And have you ever had experiences, because I know sometimes I have, where it seems like not necessarily the ones that come as our relatives, but the dream characters themselves, sometimes it's as if I feel like they try to give me tips or they try to tell me things, but it's as if like there's some kind of hidden rule, as if like they're not supposed to. So they usually give me like symbols and I'm supposed to, I guess, decipher them, which is even more annoying. But have you ever noticed that they're kind of like sneaky, or they try to withhold information when you do ask them questions or try to get stuff, pry stuff out of them?
Well, I've noticed that even with the deceased dream figures, sometimes they'll pass on information. Like one lucid dreamer told me that his mom had passed away, and here it was 5 or 6 years later, and he had lost his job. He was kind of going through a tough thing, having a hard time paying the rent that was coming up. And suddenly his mom appeared, and he became lucidly aware. And so they hugged each other, and they talked, and they this, that, and the other, and all that kind of stuff. And at the very end, she looks at him and she goes 1968. And he says, what? And she goes, 1968. And at that moment, she disappeared. And he thought, why did she say that? And he thought, was she giving me the numbers of the next day lottery? And darned if the guy didn't go play the lottery, the 1968. I mean, I think he only won 1,500, but he won $1,500 and he could pay his rent and all. So when you see something like that, you think why she didn't say, go play these numbers at tomorrow's lottery, but instead she just said 1968. So you're thinking, is this 1968 the year, or what's going on here? Because this is too strange. But you're right. Sometimes you'll see that loose dream figures provide information, but kind of like they can't do it directly, they'll do it indirectly, and hopefully you're smart enough to take the bait.
Yeah, that's always the struggle, but well, tell me, what are some of the misconceptions that people have had related to lucid dreaming in your experience, and maybe even like have you ever experienced like people being skeptical?
Right. So I'd say the number one misconception is that in a lucid dream, you control everything. That's just totally false. All the times in lucid dreams, it's true that I can influence things, that I can manipulate things, but I don't control everything. Surprising things happen. When I walk around the corner, all of a sudden, oh, there's the Taj Mahal. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't create that. Who put that there? I didn't. So you don't really control everything. It's more like you're relating to the unconscious mind. So I would say that's the first thing. There is a lot of skepticism, but lucid dreaming has a scientific basis. They brought lucid dreamers or people who claimed they could lucid dream into the sleep lab. They put rapid eye movement polygraph pads on their eyes. They told them when you become lucidly aware, move your eyes left to right 8 times. That'll be so weird to see a left, right 8 times that'll prove that you're consciously aware and doing that within a lucid dream. And so that's how they scientifically validated it. But even then, when people hear the science behind it, a lot of people are just like, I don't believe this. This is just too weird.
So, what is one thing that I guess you could leave the listeners with as maybe, your most powerful lesson after discovering all the benefits of lucid dreaming that people can do and carry into their waking lives?
The one thing that I saw was how lucid dreaming showed me how the mind works. And so once I began to see how the mind works, then I could begin to change what I was creating in my life. Like, for example, I had hay fever and I just hated hay fever. Every August, September, my nose would clog up, my throat was sore, I was coughing all night. It was a disaster. And so after I wrote my first book, I thought, well, wait a second. I have an entire chapter on how you can heal yourselves in lucid dreams. So what I decided to do was heal myself in the waking state because I saw in lucid dreams that what my mind thought and believed and expected got reflected out there in reality. So this is what I did. Every time I began to think about hay fever or get concerned, I mindfully observed it. First, you got to notice it. Then I told myself, no, not anymore. Then I told myself what I wanted to achieve. From now on, I breathe easily and naturally. And I'll tell you, I did that every time I'd start to fear August and September. I said, no, not this year. This year, I breathe easily and naturally. The first year, I had a 70% reduction in symptoms. The next year, I had a 90% reduction. The next year, I had a 95% reductions. Now I don't have hay fever because I breathe easily and naturally. I reprogrammed my mind that I want to create breathing easily and naturally. And so that's what lucid dreaming showed me is how the mind creates. We all know that the mind kind of creates a dream, but you can also see how the mind helps to create our own waking reality. Just like the woman who had anxiety and panic attacks, she realized that by understanding how the mind worked, she could resolve all of that. So that's what I'd want to leave with people. The mind creates. If you understand how it creates, then you can create a better life for yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for joining me today. And if anybody wants any more information, I'm going to leave all of the links in the description so that you can find his book and also learn more about all of the processes and techniques that he speaks about to do lucid dreaming. And don't forget to subscribe to Sacred Mindshift Circles to never miss another important event or podcast. And thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Dahlia. It's been a lot of fun.